Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Emma Wright. I'm a social worker at Western Psychiatric Hospital on the inpatient CAD unit, Autism and Developmental Disabilities. For our third presentation this month in celebration of autism acceptance and neurodiversity, Meade Gregory, who's the director of our outpatient programming and clinic, is going to talk to us about developing Toolbox for navigating life's transitions. So I'll let Alan, introduce himself and then go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Emma, and thanks for joining us today, everyone. For those of you that may have participated in CAD's in-service training with Carla Mazevsky, this is a presentation that occurred back in November. It's the same material, so I hope I don't bore you to tears, but you're welcome to stay on and listen again. But I just wanted to share that with everyone. As Emma said, I'm a program director for CAD Adult Outpatient Clinic at Western Psych. I also oversee CAD Child Outpatient Clinic at its various locations. And I have CAD Conroy as a program, and also the Vocational Training Center that's located at the Franklin Building on the south side. Want to provide a couple of caveats today. Full disclosure, I have no conflicts of interest. And just for everybody's understanding, I'm going to float between transition planning for children, teens, and young adults who have either an intellectual disability or are autistic. And to get started, really we need to define what is transition. And Merriam-Webster defines transition as a change or shift from one state, subject, place to another. Oxford English Dictionary defines transition this way: to undergo a transition, to bring from one state to a place to another. So transition is a noun, but it becomes an action verb when planning is added to that. So transition planning can be defined as planning for a change or shift from one state, subject, place to another. With that under our belts for understanding, I have an exercise that I want everybody to just sort of ponder for a little bit. You can write this down or just, mentally make a list in your head, but write down every transition you went through this morning, from waking up to arriving to when you got to this training today. Go ahead and jot those down, and we're going to compare notes here in a moment. Give you a chance to make your list. And I'm going to use myself as an example from when I got up until I got to work and what all those different steps entailed. My alarm went off, I got out of bed, I used the bathroom, I start to make coffee while I feed Winston, who is my dachshund. Once coffee's brewed, I take Winston out to take care of his business. Back inside, I'm checking work email. I'm drinking coffee, I'm packing my lunch. I go back to my bedroom where I'm making my bed, getting out clothes for the day, going to the bathroom to perform morning ablutions. When I'm done in the shower, I return to the bedroom, get dressed. I say goodbye to Winston. I say goodbye to Cosette. She's a parrot that we have in my household. I gather up my belongings and I go to the garage, start the car, back out of the garage, and drive off to work, navigating traffic lights, all of that, till I park my car in the parking garage. I gather up my belongings, exit the car, make my way to the elevator, push the button to my floor, exit the elevator, and I walk to the lobby and then to my office. Finally, I'm able to hang up my coat, get out the laptop, power it up, and start to review new emails that have arrived since I had coffee earlier with Winston before I left the house. I didn't add a lot of other things on that, but it rather illustrates for today's presentation that just that simple act of waking up in the morning and getting ready and going to work, there's a lot of steps in the process. And for an IDD young person, teenager, young adult, for an individual that's autistic, that's a young person, young adult, there are multiple opportunities for a train wreck to occur with each one of those different transitions that's occurring. Next exercise. I want you to take a few moments now and list what you think might be the top 5 life transitions. And I'm just making it 5. The first indication is it really isn't 5. It's a lot more than that. But just ponder that for a moment. You know, what are the top 5? Think about what that's like. But really, we could break it down by age group, and that's actually what I'm going to be doing here, because life transitions, they don't stop. They occur in childhood and early teen years. During childhood, transition to preschool, to kindergarten, to first grade. During school, there's transitions from class to class, from teacher to teacher, to and from recess, to and from the cafeteria, leaving and getting on the bus. During teen years, there's transitions with navigating relationships and navigating to graduation. Maybe you're going to go to college. Maybe you're navigating to employment. Maybe you're navigating to adult services once school ends. With adulthood years, well, during adulthood, you're navigating out of the family home, potentially. You're navigating to a new city, potentially. You're navigating to new providers. And as an older adult, physical changes arrive with older age. There's also end-of-year career planning and retirement. There's also the loss of friends and families. And along the way, there's employment or college, the social environment of shopping and entertainment, and neighborhoods and romantic relationships, and all of it together. So why the difficulty over transitioning for autistic individuals, particularly children, but extending into teenage years and beyond? Because transition equals change, bottom line. Any change means a new day-to-day plan. Kids on the autism spectrum particularly can become very intensely engaged in what they are doing or thinking about at any moment in time. And this can be a great strength, reflecting persistence and contributing to that child's deep knowledge of a particular subject. Having said that, this trait can also create challenges when that child's required to stop one task and move on to the next. And the child essentially becomes stuck, and monumental effort is often required to pull that child out of it. We all have heard the meltdowns. This is what I'm talking about. Additionally, the neuropsychological process known as executive function is heavily involved in making transitions. And this function helps the brain to shift and reallocate attention and other brain resources when required. And in autism, there are gaps that occur in this system. And because of these gaps, the brain struggles with stopping one task and transitioning attention and other thought processes onto another. But you're lucky I'm providing you today with some simple strategies to smooth transitions. And these are actually good for any age, really. As much notice that you can provide that the transition is going to occur is actually beneficial. Plan the day. Reduce the number of transition as much as you possibly can as a parent, as a caregiver, as a teacher, what have you. Because time can be an abstract concept, use visual supports like a timer, or avoid references to time altogether and show the child a visual representation of what's coming next. Slow down and give transition warnings with lots of times to process and come to the transition when that child is ready, if that's actually a possibility. Build in short breaks throughout the day to support their regulatory needs for movement, water, or to use deep pressure breaks to help with anxiety. Use structure and consistency, which helps reduce the amount of work that the brain needs to make transitions happen. such as keeping materials for upcoming tasks in any easily identifiable and consistent place, and keeping the general order of daily tasks consistent. And any of you out there who are parents, you know what I'm talking about, because inevitably you're going to hear in the morning, Mom, where's my book bag? Mom, where's this? All those sorts of things. Use reduced language. There's always a temptation to use language to try to move things along, only to see this backfire for our kids on the spectrum. More language can lead to verbal overload, leading to anxiety, leading to the transition taking longer. Make sure to provide light praise for good transitions and accentuate the positive and briefly point out what made that transition positive. And provide a transition object, which actually is a nice handy tool. Carrying an object can lessen stress during transitions and can accompany the child the entire day. Dangle a carrot if you have to help motivate. Now, I want to go into an area of public policy that really helps define transition planning for school age kids, if you will. And what I'm getting into is talking about entitlement services versus eligibility services. School is an entitlement. Education in the United States is an entitlement. And part of that entitlement includes something that came about back in 2014. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, it became law in July of 2014. It was a huge win for the disability community, particularly because it made transition planning as a starting point in that special needs students IEP at the table at the age of 14. OVR's got to be at the table at the age of 14. The IEP team is tasked with establishing what does a meaningful day look like at graduation for that student. Is it going to be college? Is it going to be employment? Is it going to be some type of day service? But it's now written into that special needs student at the age of 14, and we're working towards it. And literally, school districts will drag their feet on this. School districts will sort of renege on that entitlement service with families. And I'm not making this up because I met with a mom and her 18-year-old son. They happened to have been at the adult clinic yesterday, meeting with one of our doctors. It was a new patient. The doctor had me come in and speak with the family. They were from West Virginia, and they wanted to know more about transition planning for their son and waiver funding and these sorts of things. And my first question to mom was, have you had a conversation with the school about your son being able to continue in school until he's 21? And she looked at me with her mouth hung open and she said, no. And I said, okay, this is your first task going back home today. I said, talk to the school. You want your son to continue with those services in school until he's 21. And I said, the other thing you want to do is reopen his IEP because you want transition planning, a little late in this case, but that's okay. There's a couple more years that the school will be able to help with this. Until he's 21, transition planning can be part of that child's IEP moving forward. There were some other things that we talked about, but it happens still to this day, which is sobering to me that, you know, school districts do pull this sort of nonsense, but it does happen. The school is on the hook for a special needs student until that age of 21. Families do sometimes have to fight for that continuation because they want to graduate at the age of 18. Get them off the roster. They don't have to pay for them anymore. I understand schools wanting to do that, but if there's a need for that student to continue for an additional 3 years, then the family needs to speak up and make that happen. Because once graduation occurs And if it accidentally or inadvertently occurs at the age of 18 instead of 21, eligibility for services kicks in. And that requires contracting with, making arrangements with agencies out there to provide services. And that requires an ability to pay for the services because the school's not doing it any longer. There's another public policy that was defined in Pennsylvania that fits in with what I'm talking about with transition planning. And this had to do with our own state of Pennsylvania and Governor Wolf, former Governor Wolf in 2016 established Pennsylvania as an employment first state for the Commonwealth. And what made this interesting with both of these pieces of legislation, with the WIO Act from 2014 and with Employment First in 2016, is they coincided with a movement in, particularly in the ID community, of correcting a wrong, which was up until that point, and it's actually something that can continue still, is after a child has left the school system, they oftentimes with IDD, there wasn't a career path. For you and I growing up, we were asked by our parents, we were asked by the neighbors, we were asked by relatives, what do you want to do when you grow up? That was something that is just naturally occurring in households. Back when I was growing up, not so much with children that were special needs. That wasn't something that was really discussed with the families. Subsequently, it now has become something that is discussed because the school districts have, actually brought that to the table with transition planning. And so special needs kids are asked now, what do you want to do? Do you want a job? Do you want to go to a trade school? Do you want to go to college? What is it that we can help you with your dreams moving forward? Because previously, the career path was, well, if you're special needs, you're going to go to a day program. You're going to go to a sheltered workshop. And that language is still used, if you will. And in sheltered workshop settings, there was an ability to reach out to the Federal Department of Labor and secure a certificate that for any kind of compensation work that you were providing to the consumers of the program, you didn't have to pay minimum wage. You could pay sub-minimum wages of a determination from piece rate studies that the programs would do, and that's how you paid people. And including my Voc Center that's on the south side, it wasn't until WIO occurred and we revisited all of that and changed our thinking when it came to the consumers. And in 2018, we dropped the certificate for paying sub-minimum wage and began paying minimum wage to the consumers, which we have subsequently increased over the subsequent years. And so our folks, they're earning some nice money at the Voc Center. And so those pieces that we've just been talking about, they really have been game changers for kids special needs kids leaving the school system, and what are options for them now. So school teachers are not telling families, well, this is your career path, you're going to go to a day program. That's not the only career path now. There's multiple things that people can do. And it's very exciting, I think, for families because they have options now. There were limited options previously, and now families have a lot more that they can draw upon for their kids. But back to transition planning, and like I was describing with OVR being at the IEP table at the age of 14, and that's now defined that they have to be there and work towards graduation and help that child, help the family navigate what that's going to look like. But really, it can start before that. And actually, it should start before that. And so there's some things that we can start to do earlier. We don't have to wait to 14 to, prepare our kids for what it's going to look like when they're an adult. And let's start with 10 to 12-year-old. What's some skills and strategies that we can really have, kids engaging in? Well, first of all, give them chores. And maybe this is my, old school, my thinking, but I grew up at a time where, we had a lot of household chores growing up, and we earned an allowance. And we were pretty young when that happened. But, and I know that it happened for my other siblings, and it happened for my nephews and nieces. I don't know how much it happens in households now, but I think it's a good thing. Give the kids chores in the home front. Another thing to do is dream. Explore and discuss what you want to do in the future. Doesn't hurt to, start pondering this when you're 10 to 12. And start, making choices and helping that child to develop decision-making strategies. And then, have them follow through. Finish what they started. These are all skills that are going to help them down the road. And when they're 12 to 14, they can literally start describing what are employability skills. And now we can explore career and technical educational programs as potentially an option. If college isn't going to be in somebody's future, well, there's some other things that we can, start to think about. We can also start to develop a career portfolio, including copies of types of documents that everyone is going to need moving forward. And when I say everybody's going to need this, I'm not making this up, because I'm onboarding a new administrative assistant here at the adult clinic, and they're starting next week. And there is a whole onboarding workflow for anybody coming into UPMC, depending on what the position is, that needs to be met, needs to be addressed, if you will. And part of that is presenting I-9 information to prove that our new hires at UPMC aren't illegal immigrants. And so there's documentation that people can, what they can choose from to bring to the table. But it's typically things like a birth certificate, an social security card, a photo ID, such as a driver's license, these kinds of things. Or if you have a passport, which all of those things go into creating a passport. There's also some other documents that you can pick and choose from, but these are things that you're going to have at the age of 12 to 14. Maybe not the driver's license, of course, but you're going to have the birth certificate. You're going to have, or you're going to be preparing for getting a social security card. Those are things to make sure that you know where they're kept, because you need original documents when you're onboarding a new hire. And the other thing we can start doing at 12 to 14 is we can engage in community service and maybe start doing some volunteering as a way of, exploring and getting our feet wet. Age 14 to 15, we're continuing with career exploration, We can even start doing job shadowing, which is looking at jobs that may be of interest and seeing, spending a day with somebody that is engaged in that job. What is it they're actually doing? Let's see what it looks like. We're also continuing to develop our career portfolios, including resume development at this point. We're identifying and exploring all sources of potential employment. And we're also starting to understand and be able to articulate what it is that you bring to an employer. Employers don't want to hire problems. They want to hire people that are going to be able to get the job done for them. And so that's an important piece, an important conversation to have with young people. The other thing for families and the young person to start to be appreciative of is private government resources for employment, and what does that start to look like? We're now up to age 16, 17. We're still developing that career portfolio. We're updating documents. We're beginning to narrow down selections from just a job to make money to what interests me. That's a big step. We're also stating and knowing how to acquire the accommodations and supports that might be needed for employment, particularly for a special needs student, if they're going into trade school or if they're looking at colleges, and being able to advocate for themselves, if you will. We're discussing additional training and skills that are needed to continue and enhance employment, and hopefully we're engaging in competitive employment, part-time job opportunities at this point. Hopefully that's happening. 18 to 21-year-old. At this point, we're looking at kids that are on the cusp of graduating, and in some cases may have elected to graduate at the age of 18. And so we're developing skills for employment and volunteer positions, sustainability skills, if you will. We're mastering employability skills, and we're acquiring those accommodations and supports needed for employment, and additionally the resources. Other considerations along this whole journey, if you will, is we need to create opportunities or occasions for young adults to be socially active in their community, where these social skills can be role-played, modeled, and practiced. And what I'm talking about, and this may sound corny, but giving kids, particularly the IDD kids, giving them opportunities to make purchases in local stores. Give them money, put them in a pocket, and let's go into the store. Let's order food at local restaurants. Let's begin using public transportation. What does banking look like for that person? And even something even more basic than that, let's teach those navigation skills in the community. How do we cross the street? How do we use the bus? These sorts of things. And if they're carrying a phone with them, how to use the phone properly so that it doesn't become something that is lost or stolen or things of this nature. Include these job readiness skills in these considerations as well. What does appropriate dress mean for volunteering and for my part-time job? How about problem solving and conflict resolution? You're going to have elbow buddies. You're going to have conflicts with your elbow buddies. What does that mean? How can we navigate that? There's going to be interviewing. There's going to be time management issues. We're going to be making decisions. And the whole organization of how I, treat my day if I'm working, what does that look like? And for parents in particular, maintain copies of all the school records and medical information, and keep lists of contacts that you've made with agencies such as OVR. And I'll be talking a little bit more about OVR in a second, but I wanted to provide some transition tips for kids at this age that are college bound. Students must self-disclose to their college or university's Office of Disabilities if they are special needs and are thinking in terms of accommodations. IEPs are not considered documentation of a disability. Psychological documentations within the last year is needed sometimes to determine eligibility. And students must ask each individual professor for an accommodation. And they need to maintain a connection to the students' behavioral health services at the home front if they are traveling or attending school that's out of Allegheny County, out of their local community, if you will. I want to now focus on job coaching assistance and what that looks like for a special needs individual, what's available. Back to my originally talking about entitlement versus eligibility. We've now left the entire entitlement realm. We're now in eligibility, if you will. We need to find an ability to pay for services. And when we're talking about job coaching services for somebody that wants a job, whether it's college students that might be struggling or somebody that is ID or on the autism spectrum that is elected to find employment rather than go to school or a trade school or something like that. One of the first things they need to think about here are 4 options for where you can access job coaching assistance. The first is the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, excuse me. That's a state office. They're located in the counties. I have addresses that I'm going to share with everybody. There's the Bureau of Autism Services, which is now under the umbrella of the Office of Developmental Programming, which is ODP, which is the IDD world. There is private pay, and at UPMC, there's UPMC Work Partners. That's it. Now, the OVR model for coaching services. Let's start with that one first. It's necessary to establish a case with OVR. OVR will follow that up with an assessment for services, what exactly it is that you're looking for. That will be followed up by identifying a community vendor, a community provider that you'll work with. That is followed up by a contract for services with the vendor. And it's important to understand that this contract with the vendor, this OVR model, it's not open-ended. There's a time element involved. And that contract that the individual establishes with OVR will be determined, it's based on need, but it's you end up ultimately with a contract of hours. You're contracting with the vendor for a number of hours. And typically in the OVR model, that number of hours that you contract with is 60 to 100 hours. Now, I'm going to give you some sobering information when it comes to the OVR model that's occurring now. It has been occurring for a number of years in the state of Pennsylvania. The bulk of the OVR dollars that they have in the OVR's overall budget in Pennsylvania, the bulk of those dollars come from the federal government. Pennsylvania does contribute, but those dollars have been shrinking. And so OVR has had to reinvent their model, if you will, on how they're dispensing those dollars to consumers that come to them asking for OVR services. And part of that consolidation and how they're managing it now is they've actually developed a wait list. And so you make that call to OVR, you're not automatically going to get the services right away. There may be a downtime in waiting until you can contract with a provider and move forward with that. But it is something for families and that individual to bear in mind that this is something that they should just keep in mind if they need, help with employment in one facet or another that they can turn to. OVR offices. We have Allegheny County, because it's a large county, we have our own OVR office. Anybody that wants these numbers, reach out to me. I can get you all of the contact information, because what OVR also did with their restructuring is they consolidated a number of outlying counties in Western Pennsylvania and combined them into one location. And so for Armstrong, Beaver, Butler, and Lawrence County, the OVR office is in Newcastle. For Cambria, Indiana, Somerset, and Westmoreland, it's Johnstown. And for Fayette, Greene, Washington, it's Washington, PA. That's the OVR office for those counties. Now, just quickly, I want to switch gears to the Bureau of Autism Services model for employment opportunities and employment assistance, if you will, for adults who are on the autism spectrum. The Bureau of Autism Services is, I want to say, a recent creation in the state of Pennsylvania. It's probably been around for at least 15, maybe 20 years now at this point, compared to the IDD world, which has been around much longer. The services for the Bureau of Autism Services out of that office, they took the decision that because individuals that are autistic can continue with their school services until the age of 21, the Bureau's services will not start until the age of 21. An individual can register with the Bureau of Autism Services at the age of 18, but services cannot kick in until the age of 21. It's similar to the OVR model where that individual can choose providers and vendors to work with. The main difference is there's a supports coordinator that oversees the service for the individual that will be receiving the services through the Bureau. And with employment services, it includes job assessment, job finding, and job supports. Now, I'm going to add this little caveat here because it's an important caveat to be aware of. Families need to be aware of when they're thinking of going this way. At the very least, they need to sign up for the service with the Bureau. The Bureau will require documentation of autism, and the coin of the realm is having an ADOS. And so if that can be done during the school year is great. If not, families can reach out to the CAD clinics because that is something that we provide as a service, but the Bureau will require that moving forward. And just as a sidebar, if the family or individuals are thinking of, applying for disability types of insurances and such, they will need that documentation of an ADOS as well. But the Bureau's budget, when it comes to the amount of waiver dollars that are funded into Pennsylvania, is small in comparison to the waiver dollars that come in for the IDD population in Pennsylvania. It really is significantly smaller. Annually, there's a lot of advocacy that occurs with the legislature in Pennsylvania to increase the Bureau's budget. Occasionally it does get increased, but it's not nearly enough to support the volume of adults on the spectrum in Pennsylvania, but it is a start, and we do encourage families to sign up for the service. Chances are they're going to be waiting. The last I had heard, it was upwards of 3 years, or could be, until services kick in. That's why it's so important to register when you're 18 to get into the queue. But when it comes to employment with the Bureau of Autism Services and also with OVR at this point, the model that they're using for employment, the language is referred to as customized employment. What this is about is taking a journey of discovery with your individual to find out what are their interests, what are their likes, what are their talents. And part of that journey is networking with employers or individuals in the community who share the same interest and talents and can help that individual on their journey, if you will. There's ongoing supports to help smooth out the rough spots. It includes the individual maybe dipping their toe, such as volunteering to see if they actually do like it. An actual journey of discovery or customized employment, it ends up being, it's a bit of a lengthy process. Doesn't happen overnight. Typically, it can take upwards of 18 months from start to finish, if you will. which you do want to involve OVR in the process. You do want to involve the Bureau in the process, because it does become pricey, if you will, because coaching is a one-to-one scenario, and it's pricey. Private pay and other models to contribute to somebody finding employment, it's like around $85 an hour, depending on the provider, so it adds up pretty quickly. Now, for individuals that are already employed at UPMC and are on the autism spectrum, they can always reach out if they need workplace accommodations or help with their work as such. They can reach out to HR, Human Resources, and work with UPMC work partners, which can oftentimes provide accommodations to be successful in the other employment. Questions? Emma, you're going to have to help me out here because I'm not seeing any questions popping up or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I don't know if no one has put anything in the Q&A. Does anyone have questions that they just want to unmute and ask?
Hi, Alan. This is Jessica Kettle. How are you?
I saw you were on the attendance at the beginning, and that's why I said, if you heard this back in November, I don't have any new information, so I hope I didn't bore you to tears today. Nice to hear from you, Dr. Kettle. How are you doing?
Good, good. It's good to hear this because it's so complex and so many factors. Like, I've been doing this for over a decade. I didn't realize it was a federal law in terms of kids being able to stay in school. So that I learn every single time I hear you speak. I was wondering if one of the things, and I know you don't have slides here and there's not a lot of time, can you touch on a little bit of the residential part of transitions in terms of group homes, not, or if there's other options too? Because that's a question we get frequently here in the hospital setting when families, are like, we just can't manage our child anymore. We need to find them a new place to live. And that process, how that works.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. And you know what? I can actually send you some materials that came from Allegheny County's Department of Human Services having to do with applying for waiver funding and this sort of thing. I'll forward that to you. But in a nutshell, the first step is going to be that the child, that individual, the teenager, what have you, is recognized by the county as having an intellectual disability and therefore potentially eligible for waiver funding consideration. That's the key part, to get the waiver funding under your belt, depending on what type of funding that is. Group home placement is the priciest of all the waiver services out there because it literally is one-to-one, 24 hours a day, 24/7. And so what families can do for that transition is, one, connect with the county, get connected with a supports coordinator. That supports coordinator and the county will have a determination of need. They're going to do what's called a SIS assessment. It's a supports inventory scale that literally determines what are the needs of that individual. Can they feed themselves? Can they toilet themselves? Do they need help crossing the street? How long can they be in the house alone without burning down the house or turning on the stove or something like that? Will they answer the door to strangers? All these sorts of things are assessed in the SIS that will help determine what the level of need is, which then helps determine what kind of supports that person's going to need, with the supports coordinator acting as the gatekeeper to the providers. When it comes to somebody wanting then group home placement, the providers regularly connect with the county and supports coordination over, do they have openings? And so the county and supports coordination regularly present individuals that are looking for housing, looking for a group home placement. And, so the family needs to talk about, well, what is it that they actually need? Will they be okay? Will their son or daughter be okay with a roommate? Or do they need to have their own room? Those kinds of things. They call them non-negotiables, things that we're not gonna entertain having bunk beds or something along those lines. Those are things that the family kind of needs to think about with the supports coordinator. I'm also going to say something, and this is slightly off the record, Dr. Kettle, but you and I have talked about this before, but it's important for the families, I think, to actually know this. Supports coordinators come and go at the drop of a hat. COVID didn't really help the situation very much, if you will. So there's been a lot of turnover, not only in the group homes, but in the supports coordination ranks as well. But families, when they secure the waiver funding is attached to their son or to their daughter. It's not attached to that agency. And so they can walk away and take the dollars with them and find another provider. And that's something that families should, think about with that transition planning. And why I bring this up is it's an important piece because they have time to be involved with the decision making. And that means going and visiting group homes, going and looking at that neighborhood that the group home is in, maybe doing a respite overnight or something like that, or doing it multiple times, and visiting that group home, just like you and I would do if we were buying a house and we'd go buy that new house that we're thinking about at different times of the day and on the weekend, just to see what it looks like and what's going on in the neighborhood. Families need to do that. And, show up unannounced, because, this is an important decision for them. But a key piece along that line is if there's any way for the family to engage in respite, a night away from home with mom and dad, it's going to go a long way for that young person being comfortable not being in their own bed. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions, folks?
Alan,
If
this
not,
is
I'm
Emma.
going to.
I just wanted to, add on, and I thought this whenever you did the presentation in November about the Social Security cards and the birth certificates and the IDs, because with adult clients, when I was an outpatient with this setting, no idea how many times we had none of those things, and you needed at least one of them to get the other one.
Yep.
Like
oh,
that
it's crazy. It's crazy.
Such a problem.
Yeah, and the other piece, and I was sort of touching base with it, or touching on it with Dr. Kettle a little bit. We have so many families, particularly here at the adult clinic, that have been the principal caregiver all their sons and daughters' life, and that's all that individual knows.
Yeah,
and
right.
Mom and dad age, and mom and dad pass away, and all of a sudden, the siblings are faced with, well, who's going to do this and who's going to do that? And I'm telling you, that happens all the time. It just occurred with one of our patients here at CAD Adult this past week. And so there's been round the clock, supports that we've been providing for the siblings for this individual because dad died. So,
right.
I mean,
and they
families
did everything. Yeah.
Yes. And oh my God, everything. Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. And so emergency respite is about to happen. But this young fella, well, he's not young, he's maybe in his 30s, but he's never been to respite before,
right.
And on
so what a transition from living with his dad his entire life.
Yeah. And boom, boom, boom. All of a sudden, he's not only now grieving because dad's gone, but, he's not going to live at home anymore.
Right.
So it's a lot. It's right. A lot.
Yeah.
Well, folks, thank you. I'm going to leave you with a couple of pictures. Here's the Gregory household. There's Winston. There's Cosette. We thank you very much. If anybody has questions after this, please reach out, email me, reach out to Emma. She can get a hold of me. The slides are available. I can make the OVR information available. So you'll have some resources at your fingertips.
Thank you so much, Alan. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.